Okay. So the goal here is to kind of walk you all through just a lot of like very tactical tips and suggestions for how you can make better slides in Google Slides. We did a similar version of this probably 4 years ago now for Keynote, but one, most of you weren't there for that, and then two, as you know, we've kind of standardized around Google Slides these days, and so wanted to do an updated version. Google Slides has some nuances to it that are a little bit weird, but just kind of by virtue of what I spent a lot of my time doing, I spent a lot of time in Google Slides, and so I've kind of picked up some tips and tricks and things like that kind of along the way that have been super helpful for me. Hopefully you'll find it valuable too. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to it's going to be very kind of workshop-y in the sense that I'm going to kind of go through a pitch deck that I've created using just sort of the default design, and I'll just show you a whole bunch of tricks that you can use to try to make it look a little bit better. And hopefully you'll learn some things around how to be like design almost principles kind of in the process of doing this that are helpful, and learn about some tools and things like that. So that's sort of my hope. Feel free to just ask questions as we're going through it. I tend to just plow through, so just interrupt me. Don't wait for me to kind of see you, because especially as once we get into it, I'm going to be looking kind of at my screen to do kind of the designy bit. So I think that's it. Let me share my screen here, and we will go through this. Okay, can folks see? Can you see my screen to start? Yes, no, maybe so.
Yep. Yes.
By its tone. Okay. All right. So we're an imaginary company. This is our pitch deck that we're going to be putting together. So we can start maybe with slide 1 here and just kind of walk through some high-level ideas. We're going to name our company Bubble, and we're going to call it our pitch deck. So we'll start with that. And the first thing that we'll want to do is we'll want to, kind of brand it a little bit more appropriately. So we want to use our company fonts and all of that type of thing. For those of you who don't know, you've got your basic fonts here, but you can actually add more fonts, and you have access to any of the fonts that are Google fonts, basically. And so let's say we haven't theoretically done this. A lot of people talk about what are called font pairings. So when you're doing like a branding exercise, very often people will they'll pair fonts. There are certain fonts that look well, that go well together. Very often you'll see like a serif font and a sans serif font. Sometimes you'll do both sans serif or whatever, but I'm going to find kind of a nice font pairing that I want to use for this. Let's see here. I don't know, I kind of like this one here, maybe we say. So we'll use Libra Baskerville, let's say. So we've added that. And then what was the other one? Source sans. So now we'll make that our primary. And then our secondary, we'll use source sans. And so now those will be our 2 fonts kind of on an ongoing basis as an organization. Oh, there we go. Source Sans Pro. Okay, and we'll use those together, and it'll just make the site look or the deck, and then eventually our website and all those other things a little bit nicer. The other thing I'll want to do is, ideally the company has a logo. We haven't done that, but I'm gonna make a simple one real quick in Google. You wouldn't do this normally, but let's make it like a red maybe, and then we'll add a second one and make it a little bit smaller. We'll make a little donut-y thing. Okay, so there's our logo, right? We'll group this so that it always moves together, and then we'll make sure that these are aligned. One of the things that I've noticed that is one of the bigger issues with working with Google Slides is that things don't line up, or that people don't line things up. And it's probably not something that, well, it's obviously not something that most people notice, because otherwise they would do something about it. But they don't see that, like, the things aren't lined up center, or if they're left aligning, they're not lined up on the left. And that just kind of subtly creates, it makes it look uglier. And it's the kind of thing that maybe 80% of people wouldn't notice, but the 20% that do, I think it just decreases the amount of polish that you would have on your presentation. And there's no reason kind of not to do it, to make sure that it looks as good as possible. Now, the one thing with Google is, let's imagine for a minute that we were going to left align these. One thing that you'll often see with Google is that sometimes these actually look pretty good here, but they don't always line up, because they have different, the padding will sometimes be different. So if we come down here, for example, you can see that, like, my bullets don't line up over here. And so one of the things that I almost always will do is I will go into format options, and I will go into text fitting, and I will turn all of this stuff off. Basically, I'm not using Google's default padding for elements. And that way I'm able to just make sure that the things line up the way that I want them to line up. And then if you ever have a question, if it doesn't look quite right to you, you always can just go in and align like that. And then that makes sure that it looks, that it lines up all right. The other thing that I do very often is I will make use of guides. So you can add guides to your page, and we'll set some, let's say we do it maybe 75 here, and then we'll do the same thing over here at 75. And this is, and then I also will do horizontal. So I'll do a horizontal guide at, let's say 0.5 maybe, or maybe we'll go up a little bit, 25, let's say. And then likewise on the bottom. And this is another thing that I think is really useful for making sure that your slides are all clean and that everything kind of lines up where it should. When you present, or if you print it, it obviously doesn't show up, right? But it just kind of makes it look a little bit nicer and cleaner. And you'll see how we use that kind of as we go through this. But I'm going to make these centered again. And I'll move this over. Oh, that's why. You can also do this just to make sure that things are centered, but we have this center line here. But the other thing you can do is if these all line up on both sides, now you have some nice things there. Last thing with fonts, lots of people will try to draw emphasis to something by bolding something. And what ends up happening is you end up having this situation where you're trying to make everything on the page stand out, and as a result, nothing stands out. And so I think non-designers kind of underestimate readability, like how easy or hard it is to read something. And so they think that everything has to be big and everything has to be bold. And they'll use lots of colors, lots of different colors and all types of things to try to draw attention to stuff. And you'll notice that most of the time, people that are legit designers will be a lot more judicious about the color that they use. They'll be a lot more judicious about that they're not using 10 different fonts. They're not bolding everything. And so there's some other tools that you can use in your toolkit to emphasize the things that you want to emphasize. So we have one here where we have, we're working with our two fonts, but fonts have different weights, right? This is a bad example. You know what? Given that, I'm actually going to swap it out with our Playfair here, because Playfair has a lot more different options. So you can have Playfair Black, you can have Playfair Normal. So this is a display font, which means that you use it primarily for headlines and things like that. So you don't have quite as many options, but that still works. And then if you look at source sans here, we've got lots of them, right? So one of the things that we'll do is we'll use font weight to draw attention to the things that we want to draw attention to. And we'll use a lighter weight font or a lighter weight of the variant of the font to not necessarily emphasize that particular piece. And we're going to do this a lot as we kind of go through this. But that's one of our very useful friends. Another one is color. So you can come in here and you can, grab, that, for example, to try to draw a little bit less attention to that. And that can kind of work for you. The other thing that you can use is you can use contrast. So like, let's say we made the background, let's even go darker. Whoops, background. Let's just go straight black here. You can do, now we're kind of doing reversed. And then with this, you would go kind of a really darker, a much darker gray. So again, that's just kind of a way to kind of create some contrast. And then here, our logo, we probably want our logo, since this is supposed to be a donut, let's make that, let's actually make that donut color. There we go. So that's we'll say that's our title slide for our fake company here. Whoa. Okay, there we go. All right, so this is a slide that you will see very often in decks, and for a long time, I was of the opinion that you should have as little copy as possible on a slide. And that was sort of my general rule. And I've changed that over the years. I'm at the point now where I think the question is, what is the intent of the document, and how do you envision it being used? If the intent of the document is like I'm giving a keynote presentation at a conference or a workshop or something like that, I will use very few words. I will rely very heavily on imagery to make my point. And the whole point there is that it's kind of boring when you are sitting in a presentation and somebody is just literally reading off the slides that you're also reading off of. It's not a very engaging way of presenting. It doesn't arrest people's attention. It doesn't communicate emotion. It doesn't do any of that kind of stuff. And so, so when I'm presenting something where the document's only intended purpose is to be presented, I'll do that. More often than not, though, what we're creating are deliverables for clients or documents that might be presented, but are also going to be shared and disseminated later. And when we're doing that, you do want more copy, because one of the things that you'll run into is if you have a slide that just says like 46 on it, and then you share that document with people, they're not going to know what 46 means. And so, so I've evolved in my view on that. But that said, I do think that cramming a page full of copy is not a great thing. And I think that there's a lot of tools, some of which we're going to go through here, to summarize, be more concise, break slides into multiple steps or across multiple slides to kind of communicate that point and not try to jam literally everything into that one slide. I think all of that stuff can be really, really helpful. So we'll start by updating this with our the tools that we've already kind of put in place here. So we're going to use our Playfair.
Hey, Sean.
Yep.
Are you opposed to doing like a master for every slide, like so you don't have to go back and
it's tricky. So I've tried to do that. So no, and what I would normally do is what I'm showing you here is I would design this and then I would copy and paste it.
Gotcha.
The issue I've run into with masters is that they're kind of brittle. And I've tried creating them for Speciate, and it immediately broke. It's really hard to kind of design them in a way that can accommodate all the use cases. And often what you find is that you end up like accidentally editing slides that you didn't intend to edit because it gets applied across different places. And it ended up creating more problems than I thought it would. And so, not necessarily. What I prefer to do, and if I were doing this from scratch, what I would really do is I would do this step now, and then versus having to kind of go through and update all of these slides. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So we'll make this, readable, but not enormous necessarily. And that's going to be our headline. And I already did the thing where I did the text fitting, if you saw that. So I always go in here and I make sure that that's gone. which is a little bit tedious. But again, if you copy and paste it, it's not as big of a deal. Make sure that lines up, and then we'll update this with our light font. I also think, just as a, I think non-designers very rarely will use the light variant of the font, but designers often will. And I think that it adds just a bit of elegance to a document and makes it look a little bit more polished. And it's just a subtle kind of thing that maybe most people don't notice, but I think can make a difference. I'm gonna maybe do 16 for my font. And you're gonna, the idea here is to try to standardize these. So these will be, to Lily's point, we don't want lots of different font sizes are kind of all across the place here. You'll see sometimes where I deviate from that, that guidance, but it's sort of like know the rules so that you can break the rules. But as, you know, for the most part, we want to be relatively consistent with our font sizes, just so we, so it doesn't look like a random hodgepodge. The other thing I'll do is I'll come in here and I'll often I'll update the border, the color of the bullets. So I was using, what was I using here? I was using that color. So actually, that's a good point here. Real quick, while I'm doing this, if we go in here to theme, you can see they have this default theme right here, but we can pop that open, and we can change that. So let's say accent color, for example. We want to be this dark red that we're using, and that's now our primary accent. And then you can see text and background 1, text and background 2. You can have as many of these as you want, up to 6 accent colors, which is probably more than what most people would need. In a lot of cases, I work with just like gray, white, black, and then 1 accent color. So like in this case, we'll probably use a lot of this red. But if you wanted to have a larger color palette, and let's pretend you were making this out from scratch. For Manifold, for Speciate, for most of the stuff that we're doing, practically speaking, the design team is going to supply you with a color palette that you can use. Like you'll see that when we show you the Manifold stuff later. But for folks that don't, and just if you were making this up on your own, there's some tools you can use like color at adobe.com that can help you create color palettes that look nice. So if I wanted to come here and I was going to use this as my starting base here, I can drop in that color. Oops. And then it'll give me different color palettes based on that one main color. And these are using different approaches to kind of color theory in terms of how they're deciding these. So monochromatic is giving me different shades. I don't know what all of those mean, honestly. This one looks like it's, you know, 120 degrees opposite of wherever you are, right? So you can just see different different approaches. The other thing that I really like about a tool like this is they've got Explorer, which can show you like created color palettes that people are already using, color trends. So they do like, they pull stuff out from like fashion and stuff like that. So, you know, like for example, well, I actually kind of like this. So we got like a little bit of a blue here, maybe. So we could go in here and we could say, all right, instead of this text and background 3 with that gray color, why don't we use a blue here? And now we got a little bit of a nice dark blue. You copy this one, we can swap out our black for that, and that just gives it a little bit more. I think, you know, Darren would probably say, you know, we don't often use like pure black. Correct me if I'm, by the way, designers, correct me with any of this if you disagree with any of these things, but
no, we were just saying in Slack that you're like the Bob Ross of Google Slides. So we like the happy accidents.
Happy trees. So now when I come back in here and I go my theme, here's my updated theme color. So it's, ooh, that's kind of nice. That's probably a little too dark. So then we got the dark color. Let's go back into our theme. I really like this dark color, so I can grab it. And then let's say I wanted to use a lighter variant of that. I can come in here and maybe do like something like this. That's still a blue kind of. This is kind of imprecise, but it'll get you directionally kind of in the right direction. There we go. Yeah, that's got some kick-ass to it. Okay, so we'll use going forward. We'll use this slightly different blue. It's a little bit lighter, so it has a little bit less contrast. And then when we're using for things that we want to draw emphasis to, we'll use this dark blue, or sometimes we'll use the red. So for example, here, if I go into this page and I want to make my bullets pretty, which I do, I can go in here and I'll use my theme color, and that'll just make sure that it's consistent. It's one of the things that you want to make sure that everybody on the team uses, because what almost always happens with Google, it's not great. Like you can already see here, I must have used this color somewhere in here as I was putting oh, it's in this chart. Maybe that's why. They just add these custom colors and it very quickly becomes unwieldy, and you'll have a situation where you have like 5 different very close variants of this red that aren't exactly right. And again, most of the people that aren't designers wouldn't necessarily even notice that, but I do, and the designers do, and it's annoying. The other thing we want to do here is look at line height. So when you're dealing with copy, there are conventions around line height, and Google's default is this 1.15, which is actually not that bad. And again, you know, Darren, anybody else, correct me if I'm wrong. I tend to use 1.25 for line height, or I'll sometimes keep it at the 1.1. And then the other thing I'll do is I'll add spacing after an item, and I'll just play around with this, but to get to a place where I'm kind of happy with it. But you can see there that just gives it a little bit more breathing room. And then the other thing I'll do is I'll just, again, in the interest of like visual interest, this is hard to read from a readability perspective. You'll see it on the web too. Like most blog posts and things like that are laid out in such a way that they have, I think it's like 55 characters or 70 characters. There's kind of a natural width, larger than which it becomes a little bit unwieldy to read. And so you want to make it a little bit narrower so people can actually read the thing. And given that, we may want to bump this font size down just a little bit again. The other thing you want to do is you want to avoid these like dangling things where it's like one word at the end of a paragraph. And so you can play around with this a little bit to kind of get something like that. And then last thing, let's you know, this is an internal page. Let's go grab our logo and bring those in here. And we will add those so that they're on every other page kind of going forward here. Oh, whoops, not highlight, font color. Okay, and these are, there's some really simple ways that you can give something a little bit of, to make it look a little bit more designy. So like in our case here, let's pretend that, or let's just, let's actually tweak this a bit. And let's say that we decide we're going to move our headlines and our body copy over here. Whoa, dictionary. I need to, whenever I get a new machine, I always end up having that double click thing, and I gotta, it takes me like 2 months before I get fed up with it. And then maybe we put our logo up here, and maybe we do something cute like, I don't know, something like that. You can be really, again, it's not, you're not getting super designy here. You're just getting like, just to give it a little bit of visual interest. And maybe I'll actually make that a little bit smaller still, just so it's, if you ever find yourself needing to get really precise, which I often will, you do 2 things. You can zoom in, and Google zooming in is a little bit annoying. But the other thing you can do is, if you want to get like super precise with it, you can open up here and go back into format options and look at position, and you can specify to the, you know, the 100th where you want to be. So I'll find myself kind of going in there sometimes too, if I need to fit. So we'll do that. And then maybe we want to add some page numbers here. So why don't we do something cute with that too, just to give it a little bit of interest. We'll get rid of that. We'll make that color. We'll insert slide numbers. Skip title slides. Apply. And then we're going to grab this guy and move it over here. Whoops. Go with our white, make it bold. Remove our format options so that it's center it. Cool. So now we've got a nice little slide template for most of our internal pages. The other thing is you can see here, I've got some dangling space here, and it's kind of top aligned. Very often what I'll do, not always, but very often what I'll do is I'll adjust the space of this so that it's centered vertically, kind of in the middle. Again, just to kind of make it look a little bit nicer. So that's slide one. Now we'll do what I was saying earlier. We're going to copy. I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste it. Okay. And we'll go in here. So we're on our problem slide. And I'll just do paste and match style to make sure that I grab those formatting. I use the formatting here and not the other formatting. But our bubble company, here's our problem. Now, you have a slide like this. It doesn't have a whole lot of information on it. What can you do here? You don't have to default to this tight headline and bubble thing here, right? Like you could get a little bit more clever with this. So let's say that we wanted to have our slides broken up in a way where we have maybe like a smaller heading for this problem thing here. So what we could do there is get rid of the bullets and call this the problem. Another thing that you can do to kind of provide visual interest or create differences in drawing attention is we want this to be visible, but not, let's say we want this to be visible, but not like the most important thing on the page. But it is kind of, it's like a heading. You can actually, you don't have to have headings always be huge. You can have headings be small. And in order to do that, you can, again, go with weight. You can capitalize, right? Maybe we could just call it problem. And now that allows me to be a little bit smaller there, but still, you can still see what it is. And now maybe we do something like this. Now we adjust our line height here. Oops. One of the things you'll see here is this doesn't do a good job of showing you the actual size, so you end up finding yourself needing to drag a lot. And then I grab all of the elements, not just one, and then I can align them. You see how it meets up with the red line, it turns red. That's how you can kind of tell. And then right now, kind of, again, everything is sort of standing out, so maybe we do something a little more subtle. Actually, that's not that bad. So again, when I'm presenting this, people will see problem. Like this would be an example where when you're doing feedback, Sometimes folks will be like, I don't think that's readable enough, but they'll be able to see it. Okay, so we got our problem slide here. Now I can delete that. So here's our, now we're on our solution slide, bubble wrap as a service. So what do we want to do here? First, we call this solution, obviously. One thing that you'll often see is creating visual interest again in the deck by kind of going back and forth between colors, right? So this would be a good time to create a reversed version of a slide. So we can come in here, we can go to background, use that same blue we were using earlier, come in here and update our color. Make that right. You could go white with this background, with the background on this thing, but I'm going to leave it red for now. And then we're going to come in here, and this would be an example where I would use like a larger one, but it's going to be like one version of a larger one. So bubble wrap as a service is our startup idea, which it's too big, but and then and designers, question for you guys. I mean, I'll sometimes find when I'm using really large versions of a font that maybe I'll deviate from that line height, and I feel like that looks a little bit better than that. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, if you would disagree.
Sorry, I was AFK. What was the question, Sean?
So when I go really large, sometimes I'll find myself deviating a little bit from the line height thing, and I'll go like single space or single versus the 1.3 or whatever.
Yeah, I mean the built-in rules aren't going to get it right all the time, you know.
Yeah. Whoa, what happened there? What did I just do? Oh. All right. And then
I think, but you know, I think it's important to stay consistent across, you know, your heading sizes. So if you've got a heading that's, you know, 60, 72, that if you're going to wrap to a second line, if you're doing that in multiple areas, that you're just consistent with your line heights across them.
Yeah. This might be a little overkill. Here we go. And then again, notice if I want to make sure that it's vertically centered, I need to drag that up so that it lines up. Okay. Benefits. This looks like a benefit slide to me. So benefits. We'll grab these. And this would be a good example of a good opportunity to use little boxes. So maybe we move that over here for a minute. You know, I probably wouldn't use boxes for this layout because of these things. I think it's just kind of cleaner without it, but very often you'll see a pattern where you're showing like a box of 3 things, right? And just to show you some tips there, we almost always remove the border. So that's something you'll run into a lot, is that people will add borders to things. You already are drawing contrast to this by using color. And so I don't think you need a border and the color as well. I'm not a huge fan of that blue, but whatever, we'll keep running with it. You can see here, you can use this little handle to drag Very often, again, I have a tendency to kind of go for subtlety here. So I'll use very subtle rounded corners. But if we wanted to do this, as just as an example, we could notice here when I do copy and paste, it's re-adding that padding. It always adds the padding. So I just like to get rid of that. But if we wanted to do something like this, and then add some body copy, maybe you go back in here if you don't want to do that, and we'll remove those bullets. We will get rid of all this, and then we'll kind of give it some padding here. Right, and maybe we use 12 for these. One of the things that you want to be careful of when you're designing templates is very often folks will use what's called Greek text. And one of the challenges, you're not going to run into this too much with doing slide decks, but with the master concept, for example, one of the issues with it is that you don't know how long your copy is going to be, right? And so when you're dealing with something that's too rigid, you'll run into problems. And so as much as possible, you want to be working with actual copy that reflects the actual size of the thing that you're going to be kind of working with. Let's say there was another sentence here. If I were doing this for real, well, actually, let's do it for real. So that's just a way to do those types of little boxes. But like I said, I think given the layout that we're doing here, I probably wouldn't actually use this box. But if we did, again, for some reason I can't group it, but you can replicate grouping it by copy and paste. Whenever you copy and paste something, if you paste it on the same page, it's going to make it down 2 clicks and right 2 clicks. So if you tap your arrow key up twice and to the left twice, you'll see it's lined up exactly. So when it gets pasted in, if you go like this twice up, it'll be aligned on the top, and then you can drag it over. We'll do one more, and then drag it over. And then you can see these little lines here that show up that tell you it's evenly spaced. We like things to be evenly spaced as much as we can. And then the other thing is, you can go right up until this thing here. But again, we want to try to avoid bleeding beyond that as much as we possibly can. And if you find yourself in a situation where you have way too much copy and it's not working, then maybe you should break that into multiple slides. But I probably wouldn't actually use these here. I would probably be a little bit more subtle than that. And so we can line these up. Do something like that. And then drag these down. What did we say? Reduce stress, focus at work. I don't know why this bubble wrap helps me focus at work, but focus at work puts you into a deep flow state, because science. And then exercise your fingers. Your hands have muscles too. There you go. So now we got our nice little benefits slide here. Again, these we can't group that either. It's so weird. Why can't I group that? Normally you should be able to group it. I'm not sure why you can't. But I want to make sure that these are all aligned, or that they're distributed. And then again, we can drag that there. So now we go and we look at our presentation. With Google Slide, with Keynote, we will often like do slide builds. I don't think you run into too much of that with Google Slides, just because I think in a lot of cases people are viewing it in this format where it's not in present mode. Like very often you'll be presenting just in this, right? And obviously, if you are presenting and you need to get rid of the guides, but you want to be in this mode, you can just toggle that. Oh, what happened to my, whoops. And then, add that back in when you're editing. Okay, so we got that. Okay, user feedback. So again, here's an example where we got lots of copy here, right? This would be a good use case to introduce the testimonial or quote slide. And what I really like to do with something like that is, let's grab maybe this one. One of the real bummers of doing Zoom presentations is that I can't hear anybody groan at my stupid jokes. I really like doing slide jokes. Maybe we do, you could do like what customers think, right? Or you can tell people are smart, right? You can tell what customers are thinking. Janet, if you wanted to include their name, Buffalo, New York. Right? But maybe we just stick with what customers think, because this is a B2C product, Janet from Buffalo, New York, nobody really cares who Janet is. Sorry, Janet. Maybe we use we italicize this. And again, like you can play with weights if you want. I don't know. Can also look at our other one and see what are we doing here. That might actually be maybe a little bit nicer. I don't know. If you wanted to center this, you can use that center line. You can see the little center arrow deal right there. So we can, if we wanted to, we could break that into multiple. We'll duplicate that, and then we'll grab our other quote. Maybe that one, maybe we'll do this one. And then always remember paste and match style. Remember the box is too big, so we always gotta adjust your box. And then we duplicate it again, whoops. Duplicate the slide again, and we'll add our last quote. Once again, doo-doo. All right, cool. Now we got this business model slide. It's basically one line item here. So I think we can use our our reversed color. And we can say business model. And what was it? $199 a month. And then maybe we duplicate this. Whoops. Bring that down. 250 square. Premium quality bubble wrap. Ultra, maybe ultra premium. How about that? And then we can, again, we don't need that to be quite as bold. Nice little thing. That looks like that might be a little bit. Okay. Again, adjust our box. There we go. Okay, adoption statistics. So very often when people do like stats, this is actually kind of a bad example, but very often people default to reporting stats in like a chart format. So like they'll use like a pie chart or something like that. Like if you did a survey and you said like 75% of people said X, and they will use the 75% in a pie chart with the 25% as saying no. And I think I've always thought that's kind of dumb because it's like, you know that the other 25% is said no by definition. So instead, what we would like to do is do some stats. So like, let's make this a little bit, we'll grab this one. And what do we call this? Adoption statistics. And what do we got here? 25,000 customers. So we'll do something like this, 25,000 customers since January. Boy. I just feel nervous when you're typing, you know, in front of a bunch of people. Every 5% renewal rate. If you're going to use periods at the end, be consistent. 4,000 plus positive 5-star Amazon reviews. And then what did we say here? Only 4. We'll probably won't do the 4. I won't worry about the 4. Okay, but for this, we could make these all the same width here. And it should line up. You can see that it does that dealy when you're lined up. And then what we can do with that is bring these up and have them lined up and put this one in the middle and bring these up and have them aligned like that. Now you can see here, because this line is shorter, it's hard to tell that these are actually evenly spaced. So if you can either, what some people would do is they would actually like try to center it so that it looks centered that way. The other thing that you could do is if we wanted to add, again, a little bit of visual interest, let's add a little line here. So let's draw a line, and I'm going to make the line red with our little color, and I'm going to do dots. And we can come here and line it up there, and we can do something kind of cute like that. And now, again, it drops 2. Can move that over. It's hard to see a little bit, but there we go. And then now I pasted from this one, and the second time I pasted, it drops 4 clicks. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you always want to remember that. And then there we go. If you wanted to get bigger with the dots, you can. So let's say we wanted to have them show up a little bit more. And then let's say we actually wanted them above the thing instead of below. Maybe we do that. And then, you know, sometimes you can ask yourself, like, do I even need this thing? Like you can sort of tell what this thing is. So you may or may not leave it. You could do that, and I think it would probably be fine. People understand what it is that you're saying. And then if you wanted to make these a little bit bigger, again, as long as you're consistent with it, we got some space to work with here. What did I say these were? 30? 30. you go. So look at something like that. Got a little bit of visual interest. You get the gist about what it is. It's adoption statistics, and we're good. All right, charts. Lots of people run into problems with charts. Let's here, actually, let's grab this one. Or actually, we'll grab this one because we're gonna, first rule, tell the story of the chart, right? So people will very often use the title, so like new subscribers by month, but that doesn't tell people what you're wanting them to see with this, right? And so instead, I want to come in here and I want to tell a story with this chart. And so what am I saying with this? I'm saying hockey stick growth. Or let's see, I don't know. Let's like, I'm gonna make up a number, but it's like 79% month over month growth since launch, right? So that's like a headline. That's the takeaway I want them to take out of this. The other thing that you could do is say, again, you want to draw people's attention to it, so you can use your color friend here to do that, right? And then let's go into the slide itself. So Google Slides links them to a spreadsheet. So you can see here, it should load. I want to come in here, I want to edit this. You're limited in what you can do from an editing perspective. So for example, I have a much more limited palette of fonts that I can work with. So what I tend to do is I tend to try to find the font that I think is maybe closest to the one that I'm using here elsewhere, which is this Source Sans. So if we look at that, maybe we think that it's Verdana, let's say, or maybe Tahoma, I don't know. And then you play with font size. But then the other thing that we'll do is I don't want to draw your eye to every single thing on the page. And so I will actually go in here and again, if I were doing this for real, I would go in here and like edit the font, the colors of everything. I'm going to grab just this one here because this is the one I care about. Go in here and I can use accent color 1. And that will be my accent color. And then accent color 2 is I want that red that we were using. So what I'll come in here and do is I will come in and edit this, and I will tend to make the color of that just noticeable, but not like super contrasty. And I'll draw and what I want to draw your eye to is the chart here, which is, we're going to use our dark here for that. I'm going to edit my theme. Oh, it looks like I must already be doing it. There we go. So that's actually, this is kind of a bad example. This color is probably too light. What I would probably do here is create one that's a little bit in between. But the idea here is you don't necessarily have to have these be super, super high contrast. I'll make this that again. You can also go a little bit smaller with font if you want, right? And then the other thing that you can do is, like, let's say you're trying to tell a story. Oh, hang on, before we do that, my grid lines, I'll often come in here and I'll edit my grid lines. Horizontal, vertical. Grid line color, maybe that is a good use of that, or actually I would go even lighter than that. Like I want it to just be noticeable. And then the other thing we'll do is, let's say September was like an important month for us. I'll use my accent color for that. Oh wait, if you tap it and you do that, you can format data point, and then this will allow me to change just this one, right? So now I can come in here and go back to my little chart and update it. And now it looks like that. Now, the other thing you'll notice is very often people will want this to be bigger or whatever. If you try to adjust the size of this in Google Slides, it warps it. So you can see, I don't know why they do this. It's kind of annoying, but not a fan, right? So what I end up having to do is, let's say I wanted it to be this width, for example. I end up kind of going in here, deleting it, and then I come in here and I'll edit the width, because if you edit the width here, you can see the copy is not getting all warped. And then I can copy and I can paste the chart back in, and it's pretty close. You get the idea. If I were doing this for real, I would make it go all the way there. But so that's charts. We got maybe 10 minutes left. I'm gonna just keep going because I don't have something right after this. If you have to hop off, you can. I'm recording it, but we got, I don't know, a couple more slides. I wanted to show you like how to deal with images in Teams. So maybe 10 more minutes if you want to hang. So maybe we'll do that. We'll jump down to team first, and we'll create an image for the founding team. And then if we have time, we'll do roadmap. All right, so founding team. So Jared worked in an Amazon shipping facility. First of all, Jared Benson, let's say, and we'll make that. And then CEO. Right. And then do our second one, which is Lindsay. Right. And then Brad. Right. So we got those in there, and now we need our photos of them. By the way, if you ever need to make stock, use like stock photos for people. So like if you're doing personas or you're designing mockups or whatever, those guys already know. But just in case you don't, Unsplash is a great site with free photos. And if you type in persona, you'll see a whole bunch of pictures. So let's say that's one of our guys. Maybe that's Lindsay. And then that'll be Brad. Show in Finder. Okay, we're gonna bring these people in here. Obviously, if you can get great high-res photos, that's amazing. You can't always do that. But we're gonna bring all three of them in here. These are all actually, I think, the same width and height, which is nice. It's not usually like that. So if I had something like this, you got to work with the assets that you have, So if I had something like this, I could do, I could actually go kind of horizontal with them, right? And then if we want to kind of give them a little bit of interest, you can mask with like a rounded rectangle, right? And then do the same here. And then drag my little yellow dealy, and then do the same thing here, and drag my little yellow dealy. You can actually do this with all kinds of shapes though. So for example, let's say we wanted to do like a triangle. Like maybe you could get like a kind of have a cool look like that, right? Where you got these, and then you can, space them that way. That's kind of neat, right? You have some options there. But we don't always have that as an option. So some other things that you can do. Let's say that the photos are all different sizes. So let's say we've got this guy here, and we want to bring him in. Having the photos where like Sometimes their head takes up the majority of the frame and sometimes it doesn't. Like if we were just to resize this down to the same size, I kind of don't like that as much. I kind of like them all having similar kind of head sizes, for example. So if you double click, it creates this cropping tool. So you can kind of crop accordingly, right? And then you can kind of drag the underlying image around if you want. So, that's a good start, but I actually would love to have him be, his head to be similar sized to them, just to have some visual kind of consistency there. So I would do something like that, right? And then I can add my little rounded rectangle. And now they all kind of look the same. The other thing is that you'll often find that if you're taking, random photos from people and they were taken at different times under different lighting conditions and things like that, they don't always look that great together. And so if that's the case, what I'll often do is I'll go into format options and go into recolor. And then you can do stuff like, like that, or that. And that just, if you go grayscale or something similar to grayscale, it makes it a lot more kind of consistent, regardless of kind of the lighting conditions. And if you need to, you can do some little adjustments here. Like I can go in and I can adjust his brightness a little bit. Maybe I want all of them to be a little bit brighter. Right? So you can do some subtle stuff that way. But anyway, so we've got, we'll bring him over here. We'll bring her in the middle here. Whoops. What's going on? And now I'm doing something like that instead, right? Where I go, when you're having difficulty grabbing stuff, zoom in. So again, you can do something like that to create visual interest. Maybe we even go with that lighter color if we wanted to, or we can go with a brighter color, like something like that. And that can work. And then drag these to line up, be the same width. And now you can line these up that way. Like so. Actually, it's a little bit too wide, isn't it? So in this case, so it's a lot of, like this is the other reason why templates, like working just from masters can be tough, right? Because it's a function, a lot of it is a function of the copy, right? Paste and match style, always paste and match style. There we go. So we got our team here, learned about some images, learned about how cropping and those adjustments kind of work. And then maybe we'll do just the last one. We'll do like a product roadmap slide, just so I can show you like a timeline, because that can be kind of a cool thing. So let's start with this. Actually, we'll do our, we haven't done this in a while. So again, we like interest, product roadmap. Simple way to create a calendar, like a timeline type of view is, we'll keep this down here for now. Grab this guy. so that we're consistent. And we can go wider. If you hold down Shift, by the way, as you're dragging, it locks it according to certain degrees, right? So versus having all of that and being kind of funky, you can just go all the way here. And maybe we go with this lighter color so that and it's hard to see right now, but if I can show you, if I hide my guides, you can see the dotted line right there. So show guides. And then what we'll do is we will do little data points, right? So we can say, line that up, make that our red, get rid of our border. Again, I know it looks funky right now, but if you hide guides, it's there. Or you could even go white if you wanted. Do you want to go white? Why don't we go white? And then we can drop our little timeline things in here. January 2021. And maybe we use our Playfair black. Whoops. I think we're adding the spacing. So maybe we go 4. There you go. And now we can copy these guys. Let's make that smaller first. Multiple bubble sizes. March. And then do the same thing again. And again, we want to use our width here. There we go. March, and then July 2021. Virtual reality. Cool. And now you got that. So we got a nice little deck here. As you saw, we didn't need to use Photoshop once or any tool like that. You were able to do basically everything in here. You got nice, contrast. You got nice visual interest. You got multiple different formats. You're telling a really compelling story. I didn't include the ask here, but if we did, we would have, asked for a whole bunch of money and successfully raised it. That's it. Any questions about this? And then when you're done editing, you can hide guides and then you just have that available to you. But any questions that we didn't cover or things I didn't mention?
Sean, how do you, go ahead, Becky, sorry.
Sorry. Are there certain scenarios where you use Google Slides over Keynote, or how do you make that decision?
Well, these days I'm using Google Slides pretty much all the time. And it's not because I like, to be candid, I mean, I much prefer Keynote as a design tool. It's just a lot easier to use. I think just the constraints of being in the browser are a little bit kludgy, but the upside of collaborative editing, the upside of, I know Keynote has like sharing now, but not everybody in the company works on a Mac. So that's an issue. So collaborative editing, I think, is a huge one. Being able to work with clients on it, I think, is a big one. I wouldn't say I'm a convert in the sense that I prefer it, but I am a convert in the sense that this is what I'm working in almost exclusively. Now, the times when I will create in Keynote would be, for example, just if there's a visual that I'm trying to create that I have a lot of difficulty with. So like DI deck, let's see here, refresh over to deck. This might be an example. Maybe not, let me see. No, this is not an example. DI deck. let's try this one. Yeah, okay, so something like this with these lines, like creating like curved lines is easier for me to do in Keynote. Something like this is a little bit easier for me to do in Keynote because one of the issues is like I can't lock layers in slides, and so it's really easy to accidentally click this thing and move it around, and that can just be kind of a pain in the neck. And as you saw, it's a little bit more finicky about grouping elements and things like that too. And so a chart like this would be a reason why I would maybe use Keynote, but then I copy it anymore. I'm copying it and I'm dropping it back into Google Slides. So, Darren, I think you were going to ask something. Or?
Yeah, I was going to ask sort of, you know, the general opinion on page titles or sections.
My opinion? Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on the nature of the deck. So, I mean, one of the things I've learned, you know, again, over the years is like when presenting to a client, having page title or having page numbers at a minimum is always a good idea. I think having page titles, you know, I don't have any issue with, and I very often will do that. What you know, like if we were going to do an example of something like that, maybe you would drop it, you know, this isn't for Darren's benefit, by the way, because he would do a better job than I would, but, you know, bubble pitch deck. And then I just make sure that it's lined up with the, I make sure that it's lined up with the page number on a vertical basis. If you do vertical and it's not showing you what you're wanting to see, there's a good chance that you have spacing on the bottom. So you want to go in here, and that's what I have here. So I go to 0, and then there now it's vertically centered. But yeah, I don't have any issue with it. And you know, when you're dealing with long decks or things that a client is going to demonstrate to people, I think it's generally it's always a good idea to have page numbers at a minimum. And then I think also including there's nothing wrong with having a page title. I've also, you know, like a longer deck, we'll do sections too, you know. So like the other thing that we didn't talk about is like you can use opacity as your friend. I'm careful with it because Google has problems with it, but like section 1, section 2, section 3, one of the things that you can do is go in here and see, the only way to do it, it's kind of frustrating actually. Yeah, see, they don't really have great opacity options. So you end up finding yourself having to use either, you know, different versions of that. But like you can, this is just again, another way to kind of draw attention to the thing that you're wanting to draw attention to. So let's say we're in section 3 now, I would do something like that. If I'm in Keynote, I would use opacity and make these like semi-transparent so that you can hardly see them, but they're just there enough that you know, like that's kind of what's going on. But we'll sometimes use that for like subsections of a deck. And then very often, yeah, you'll create a slide, something like this, that's like a subsection, a subheading, you know, not a title slide, but a subtitle slide.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever find yourself creating like for decks that are 30, 60, you know, slides long, any sort of table of contents or other wayfinding?
Like an agenda. Yeah. Like, I mean, we even do that, you know, we do that in our all hands. You know, we'll create agendas. So yeah, again, I don't have any issue with that at all. What did we don't punish? Did we do that? Did we work on that in Google Slides, or was it a Keynote? Do you remember, anybody?
Yeah, it was Google Slides.
It was Google Slides. So I'm just not seeing it. I don't know where it is, but yeah, we had an agenda in there. Yeah, I don't have any issue with an agenda. One thing that I sometimes get in trouble with people is things like labeling the axes. My view is, I think it depends on if it's relatively obvious what it is that you're showing. So with my headline here, I'm saying 79% month-over-month growth since like customer growth, let's say, right? You could argue that saying like, what is this? Is this active users or is this total users or whatever would be valuable? I always like the cleanliness of not having axes titles, but sometimes that's unavoidable. And that's one of the things that I'll sometimes get in trouble with doing, but I like that it's clean. Cool. All right.
Anything, yeah, the
Okay.
last question I would have, Sean, is, you know, I've seen earlier decks that make use of the sort of presenter notes.
Mm-hmm.
If you're sort of consistently saying the same things on slides,
Yep.
right? There's sort of a see-say problem where you don't want, and this is maybe more of a storytelling or a narrative, you know, side of the equation, but
Yeah.
you don't always want to say what you're writing down.
Yeah, I almost never, I mean, and that's just something, just like as a presenting tip, is like, if you find yourself reading off your slides, that's a problem. And people's eyes are going to glaze over and they get bored. And being in Zoom, we already are getting bored. Most of you were probably bored for most of this. But if I was reading just verbatim off slides, it makes it even worse. The thing with Google that's dumb / tricky that I've learned the hard way, again, very often you are presenting with this view and not in the present view. And so if you're going to use speaker notes, you have to make sure that you go down and you drag this and you say presenter view, present with audience Q&A and speaker notes. And what that will do is, you can see here, if I had my notes here, it would be in this section, and then you can drag it obviously over to your other monitor if you're using dual monitors. But the trick is, again, relying on everybody to not do that can sometimes be tricky. And then like you can see right down here, my speaker notes as I'm presenting. So that's just one thing to kind of keep in mind. That's an issue that you won't run into with Keynote or with anything else, but because this is an online collaborative editing tool, that's one of the, not cons, but just one of the nuances that you need to be aware of. So just make sure that the internal team, anybody that's going to be presenting it, has alignment, and ideally maybe even like a checklist of like, hey, make sure you either turn off, like if you're planning on presenting like this, make sure you turn off show speaker notes. Or if you plan on presenting and you need the speaker notes, make sure you go into presenter view and not be presenting from just the main view. So cool. All right, guys, thanks so much for doing this. I know we went over a little bit. I appreciate you for hanging in there. Like I said, we recorded this, so we'll send it out or post it in Slack. But hopefully one or two things in here were helpful for you. And I appreciate it.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks, Sean.
it was awesome.